Curious, setting the scene, this is the image Hannibal, Missouri projects to the world. It's the boyhood home of Mark Twain, a place of fishing poles and white picket fences. On the surface, it's the quintessential American small town. But on November 13, 2009, that safety felt like a facade. 21-year-old Christina Whittaker went out for a night in Hannibal's Oakwood neighborhood and vanished. She left behind her family, her home, and a 6-month-old daughter she never came back for. The official investigation hit a wall almost immediately. Police opened the file, but with no clear evidence and a sudden lack of witnesses, the momentum evaporated. Within months, the case was effectively cold. Christina's mother, Cindy Young, refused to let the silence take over. She spent the following years acting as her own investigator, knocking on doors, hanging flyers, and refusing to accept the town's growing indifference. As Cindy pushed for answers, the town's character seemed to change. These historic brick buildings represent a community that began to close its doors. People who used to be neighbors stopped talking, and the information flow simply dried up. When official progress stops, the investigation doesn't disappear. It simply changes hands, leaving families like the Whittakers to become the sole drivers of their own search for justice. 8 months after the disappearance, Cindy met documentary filmmaker Christina Fontana. Fontana was struck by Cindy's persistence and turned her camera toward the case, beginning a journey that would eventually span over a decade. The scope of the project was massive. This timeline tracks 11 years of Fontana's life, representing over 400 hours of raw footage, including interviews, field notes, and video diaries that grew more complex with every trip to Missouri. This decade of work took a heavy emotional toll. Fontana later described the case as an obsession, one that followed her home to Los Angeles and made it impossible to truly switch off, even when she wasn't filming. As the hours of footage piled up, Fontana didn't find a simple answer. Instead, she captured the town's internal friction, the conflicting stories and the long-held silences of people who seemed to know more than they were sharing. Documenting a cold case for 11 years reveals a difficult truth. Often, a massive collection of data doesn't provide a map of the crime. It just documents how effectively a community can talk in circles. In the absence of facts, rumors began to fill the gap. One persistent theory suggested her body was hidden on a local hog farm, somewhere in the vast, rural landscape surrounding the town. Another theory claimed Christina was sold into a trafficking ring. This was a narrative Cindy Young herself eventually adopted, convinced that her daughter was being held somewhere against her will. Then there were the local suspects, like Darcy "Bookie" Morris. While he was never charged in this case, he eventually went to prison for 25 years for a completely unrelated murder, adding another layer of suspicion to the town's history. This network map shows the problem with hearsay. The theories create a smokescreen, overwhelming investigators with noise. Fontana spent years testing these stories, eventually setting aside the rumors of trafficking and the hog farm, narrowing her focus until one specific, actionable lead remained. Solving a case like this is less about discovery and more about subtraction. It requires stripping away the town's local mythology until only the data that can be physically verified remains. That data pointed to a specific property once owned by a man named Glenn Ledbetter. Members of the local Romanological community provided a precise lead. They alleged that Christina's body was hidden in a well on that land. This source described a woman who had been deceived by people who wouldn't let her leave. It was the most hyper-specific information to emerge in over a decade of searching. But having a specific location...
Keep watching. Your next video starts now.
For 3 generations, the Murdaugh name was the law in South Carolina's Lowcountry, with family members serving as the region's top prosecutor for nearly a century. Alex Murdaugh was the heir to all of it. State prosecutors built a timeline designed to show Murdaugh was a desperate man. They argued that while facing the collapse of a massive years-long financial fraud, he shot and killed his wife and younger son at their hunting estate to buy time and sympathy. After 6 weeks of testimony, the jury reached a decision in less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge handed down 2 consecutive life terms, leading the public to believe the case was over. This verdict represented a rare moment where a historically privileged legal system successfully held a man who had spent his career navigating its inner circles accountable. That sense of finality evaporated in May 2026 when the South Carolina Supreme Court stepped in and officially voided the conviction. Murdaugh was soon back in a prison jumpsuit, standing in front of a new judge to schedule a complete retrial for April 2027. This reversal happened without the discovery of a new suspect or any physical evidence suggesting Murdaugh's innocence. Instead, the conviction was erased because of the conduct of the person in charge of the jury. Becky Hill served as the Colleton County Clerk of Court during the 2023 trial. In that role, she was the state official responsible for managing the jury's needs while remaining strictly neutral. Jurors later provided sworn statements claiming Hill violated that neutrality. According to those reports, she whispered to them during the trial, telling them to watch Murdaugh's body language closely and warning them not to be fooled when he testified. Murdaugh's legal team alleged Hill had a financial incentive to secure a conviction. They argued she pressured the jury for a fast guilty verdict to ensure a better narrative for the book and media deals she was already pursuing. Hill eventually published a memoir, but by December 2025, she had pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice and perjury. She was sentenced to probation and community service. Because of Hill's actions, the legal focus shifted away from the evidence of a double murder and onto the integrity of the courtroom itself. The Supreme Court ruled the legal system fails when outside influence enters the jury room. Justices wrote Hill placed her fingers on the scales of justice, denying an impartial jury. Physical evidence doesn't matter here. A compromised jury poisons the process, automatically voiding the verdict. This case functions as a constitutional stress test. The state is required to protect the rights of a confessed criminal to ensure the rules that protect everyone else remain intact. It is important to distinguish a voided trial from a declaration of innocence. The court ruled that the procedure was broken, not that Murdaugh was wrongly accused. Murdaugh is not being released. He remains in state custody while the prosecution prepares to restart the murder case. Regardless of the murder trial's outcome, he is already serving a nearly 40-year sentence for the financial crimes he pleaded guilty to, including the theft of millions of dollars from his clients and associates. The legal system treats these cases separately. A failure of integrity in the murder trial does not erase his admitted guilt in the financial fraud. This means that on April 5, 2027, South Carolina prosecutors must present their entire case to a new jury and begin the process all over again. For now, we are left with an outcome that satisfies no one. Legally speaking, who killed Maggie and Paul Murdaugh is once again unsolved. There is a sharp irony in the way the case has circled back. The Murdaugh family spent a century in the South Carolina Low Country, using their power to control the legal system. A man whose family legacy was built on mastering the rules of justice was only saved from a life sentence because a different court official decided the rules no longer applied to her.